here, John. Backstories. I had the privilege of interviewing Steve Owens, who was my hero growing up. I mean, I had a number 36 jersey. But John, you did Barry Sanders. I mean, arguably, I think he's the greatest running back ever.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that folks will see at the end of the piece. That was the last question that I asked him, and he handled it he handled it the way you might expect Barry Sanders to handle that question.
He threw it back to the referee, didn't he?
I tell you, yeah, he did. He just kind of tossed it back, and very, very humbly handled the question. You know what I found, though? He gave us almost an hour when we thought we were going to get about a half an hour with him in Detroit a few weeks ago. He gave us almost an hour. He couldn't have been more comfortable. He laughed easily. That's another thing that you'll see in the piece. Just a tremendous hour to be able to spend around someone that I don't see very often. But when he saw me, I wondered, would he make the connection? And when he saw me, he said, "Hey, it's been a long time. Hey, it's great to see you." So it was just great catching up with him.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to ask for some technical expertise. Hey, Ryan, when you get a second, buddy, would you come in here? We've got comments, but it is way too sophisticated for me to try to manipulate my iPad in such a sense that I can actually see the questions. I mean, it's pretty pitiful. Ryan, can you come help me do that real quick, buddy? Ryan can fix anything.
I see you now too, Kelly.
Right.
If I'd have known that, I wouldn't have worn a tie. I'd have...
I got a Dean Blevins pocket square in. Here you go, Ryan. Will you do the proper adjustments there so that I can see comments?
Did you get that out of his mahogany lacquered pocket square box?
His humidor for pocket squares?
Yes, yes.
Now
yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to ask, the Steve Owens thing, that's really, I mean, that goes back to my earliest real memory of following
really?
football somewhat closely here. Yeah.
How old
I'm
are
not trying
you?
to make you feel older. Well, I mean,
You're
obviously
old.
a little younger than you, but
yeah, no. When I can remember very well, of course, my dad and Bob were doing the games back then on the radio for WKY radio. So Dad would load all us boys in and take us down, and we'd sit down in the $2 end zone. And quite frankly, the best thing about that was climbing around underneath the end zone on the bars, and we'd always go home with green hands. But we knew who Steve Owens was. We knew who Granville Liggins was. We knew who Steve Zabel was, Bobby Warmack, Jack Mildren. I mean, of course, then you go into the 71 team. It was unbelievable. But that was my really first recognition of Sooner football. So I grew up on that. And Steve Owens was, I mean, he's always conducted himself with such class, and even then, such a gentleman.
Oh, no question about it. And, you look at, let me just take this comment that you want Justice Hill, their outstanding running back on this year's team. How many times a game would you like for him to carry the ball? And Mike said, ideally, about 15 times.
Wow.
If I remember right, Steve Owens carried the ball one time, 55 times in a game?
55
and the game was different
OSU.
back then,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was crazy.
His senior year, Johnny, averaged 36 carries. Averaged. I mean, that is unheard. The guy was durable, and you're going to see in the piece that we talk a little bit about the way he trained. And he told me, and this is not in the story, that when he got to OU, they didn't even have hardly a weight set. And Bud Wilkinson didn't believe in it because he thought it ruined the player's flexibility. That was from Steve Owens.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So he goes in there and he starts working out, and it shocked Barry Switzer, who was his offensive coordinator. And Steve said, "I got to do this to be able to run with the ball like I do."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I remember, they used to tell us in basketball they didn't want us lifting weights very much during the season because it would screw up your shot, but I never would have guessed for football that they would want you to stay away from the weights. That's crazy.
I know it. Really, his whole situation at OU was interesting, Steve Owens. And we're going to, and the neat thing is, before we get too much into Steve Owens, we got Billy Vessels. So little is known about him by most Oklahoma football fans. He kind of changed the face of football.
Yes, he did. He sure did. And he's from up around in Green Country, on the edge of Green Country in Cleveland. Oklahoma, and just the way that he was able to advance the game, which you'll see in that critical contest, I think with Notre Dame too, where we found a lot of great old footage of that game and some of the commentary of that game too. That commentary, because I can remember listening to your dad and Bob Berry do a lot of those games. Their commentary versus the commentary you're going to hear in some of the Billy Vessels piece, it's like your dad had advanced the game at least a half century too. But it's enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, it is. And we go in chronological order through this Heisman special. And then, so next up we go Steve Owens after Billy Vessels, and then Sims. What an incredible player Billy Sims was. And it's so special. He and his relationship with Barry Switzer and Steve Owens now.
Yeah, and one interesting part of that Billy Sims recruiting process was there was a phone call made, without giving away too much of the details. The phone call was made by Barry Switzer. It's the timing of the phone call, where he called, and where Billy was, all make for a really good story in that particular piece. I can also remember Billy Sims, during that year, just cruising along there, and then they ran into a little bit of a problem with fumbles in Lincoln. Then they got the rematch, maybe a year ahead of myself, year after that. But I remember that distinctly too. But Billy Sims was he was a running back that took the game airborne too.
Yeah,
I mean,
he was amazing.
He would flat out flying kick guys.
Yeah,
even in the NFL.
Hey, Jeff Eager is asking who was the greatest Heisman candidate ever from Oklahoma. I don't know if he's thinking greatest Heisman winner, because, I mean, what do you think, buddy?
Yeah, it's hard to argue. If you want to go statistically speaking here, we could do it that way. And then, I mean, you'd have Sam Bradford, right there with all those numbers and that incredible offense, which we'll detail in the piece with him. When his comment is, we were trying to score 50 or 60 a game. We always used to laugh when Barry Switzer would say, we hung half 100 on him, but that was kind of the norm because nobody could stop that wishbone attack. But then you get Sam Bradford's attack. I mean, statistically speaking, Kelly, his numbers were very impressive, but you stack them up, and in a sense, maybe apples and oranges a little bit, but Barry Sanders still has the single season rushing mark, and they don't even count the yards he gained against Wyoming in the bowl game still, and he still leads Division I college football in that regard.
And most people consider it untouchable. Hey, let's let folks know, John, coming up here in about a minute, we're going to roll the special. You're going to see it here on Facebook Live if that's the only way you're watching right now. You're going to see it on Facebook Live, and when we go to a commercial break in our special, we'll be here on Facebook Live to get your thoughts and comments on what you've just seen. And then we'll roll the next segment just like it's live on TV, only it'll be on Facebook. And then when we get to the end, we'll spend some time talking about it. So we're about 30 seconds out now, John.
Yeah, I really want to thank a lot of people involved. Kelly, you and I were involved in this to a great degree, but there's so many people behind the scenes that make this thing happen. And the turnaround time on this, we're talking about idea, the conception, all the way to the execution of what you're going to see tonight in about 4 months.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Our executive producer on this, Amanda Hager. We've got Deanne Stein, who was assistant on this. She was incredible, wrote a lot of it. Craig Gaglia, who edited so much of it, and then your crew's up in Tulsa. We'll hear about them coming up. Now enjoy the special.
Our State, Our Heisman is presented by VW of Edmond.
Oklahoma is Heisman country.
7 men from our state have won college football's biggest prize, the Heisman Trophy. Good evening, I'm Dean Blevins.
And I'm John Holcomb at the University of Oklahoma. Tonight we dive into the careers of Oklahoma football royalty, their defeats, perseverance, and triumphs.
Thank you for joining us for Our State, Our Heisman.
Winning the Heisman Trophy was kind of showing that all the summer workouts in the Schmitty, all of the tough times you went through with your teammates, all that was worth it.
Oklahoma's latest #1 overall pick, Baker Mayfield, takes us inside his Heisman-winning season.
It was an incredible feeling, in a weekend that, I'll never forget.
And still to come, why OU's Sam Bradford nearly ended up on the hardwood instead of the gridiron.
I spent more time with Billy recruiting Billy probably than any other player I recruited.
We traveled to Hooks, Texas, where Billy Sims was pumping gas when he got a phone call that's become legend.
The greatest college football player ever.
Mike Gundy looks back on playing with OSU's greatest running back, Barry Sanders.
So many things changed for me in that moment.
Also ahead, suffering from injuries, just how hurt was Jason White in OU's national championship loss to LSU?
That's the million-dollar question.
We've got the answer and much, much more coming up.
The Sooner who started it all is Billy Vessels.
Craig Day takes a look at Billy Vessels' 1952 Heisman Trophy winning season and one historic performance that put Billy Vessels on the national map.
From his high school field here in Cleveland to the University of Oklahoma to the Heisman Trophy and beyond, Billy Vessels was a remarkable athlete.
Coming off injuries his junior year at OU, no one would have predicted what would come next for Billy Vessels. Then a 1952 game against Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana changed everything.
Oklahoma's brilliant quarterback, Eddie Crowder, steps back and fires one into the arms of Bill Vessels, who sprints over the goal for a touchdown.
The Sooner clash with the Fighting Irish was the first nationally televised college football game.
People across the country in New York and Boston and Chicago and Los Angeles, San Francisco, they got to see Oklahoma for the first time.
And they got to see this amazing athlete named Billy Vessels.
From the Notre Dame 47, Billy Vessels slashes through tackle for 7.
I think he had both great speed, but he had to be a grinder because that was the kind of defense that he was playing against.
Michael Dean is an OU sports historian and has been part of the OU football broadcast for nearly 30 years.
As a halfback back then, he would run for touchdowns, he would receive passes for touchdowns, and they even had the halfback pass. He would occasionally throw a pass for a touchdown.
And Billy Vessels put on a show in the game against the Irish in front of 57,000 fans and those television viewers across the country.
Before Notre Dame's startled defenders can give chase, he's off on a 62-yard scoring canter to give the Oklahoma Sooners a 14-7 advantage at the end of the first half.
In just that game, Vessels gained 195 yards on 17 carries and scored all 3 OU touchdowns.
Now watch the brilliant Mr. Vessels strike like lightning. On a neat cutback, the hard-running speedster heads for the sidelines, breaks clear, and streaks for 44 yards to rack up his 3rd touchdown of the game. But Notre Dame's inspired Fighting Irish topple unbeaten Oklahoma, the nation's #4 team, by a thrilling 27-21 score.
Although Oklahoma lost the game, Vessels won over Heisman voters.
And that probably as much as anything influenced the Heisman Trophy voters, most of whom were back on the East Coast, because now they finally saw this Billy Vessels guy on television, and that probably did as much to influence them to vote for him. He was notified that he won the Heisman. He had to ask somebody, well, what's that? What's this Heisman thing?
Billy Vessels, it is my great honor as president of the Downtown Athletic Club of New York to present to you the Heisman Memorial Trophy for the outstanding college football player for 1952.
Mr. Postel, I certainly appreciate this great honor in receiving the Heisman Trophy for 1952.
In a different era with different styles of offenses, not as flashy as today's high-powered attacks, Vessels was impressive that Heisman-winning year. His 1952 season included 1,072 rushing yards, 209 passing yards, and 18 touchdowns.
Those kinds of numbers are absolutely eye-popping for that era, for the early 1950s. It was a total different time, totally different coaching styles, totally different playing styles, totally different defenses, offenses than we have today. What he did back in those days was something that was unheard of.
He palmed a pitch out from Crowder for a 47-yard scoring dash.
Not only did Billy Vessels win the Heisman Trophy for his sensational senior year as a Sooner, he also, in many regards, unknowingly changed the future of college football.
And the futures of players yet to come, like 1969 Heisman winner Steve Owens.
So when I was growing up, Billy was my hero, and No, he was the kind of player that I wanted to be like.
Dean thinks Billy Vessels was a change agent for college football and America's perception of college football, and helped to pioneer more potent, high-powered offenses that would come later as the game evolved.
If you talk to the most recent Heisman Trophy winners, they would look back at Billy Vessels as the guy who started it all, who made it possible, who created the kind of football that they excelled at that helped them win the Heisman. They will look at Billy Vessels as the one who helped set the course for Oklahoma football in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and up to today.
Billy Vessels' Heisman win inspired a lot of young boys across the state of Oklahoma who wanted to become Sooners one day.
One of them was growing up in Miami at that time and has a special connection with our Kelly Ogle.
Take a look at the starting lineups, and here's Bob Berry.
Thank you, Jack, and good afternoon, everyone.
My connection to OU was Jack Ogle, Bob Berry.
The varsity operating from their own 8-yard line.
My dad and Bob Berry were the radio broadcast team for OU football in the 60s.
I used to listen to them. They'd paint that picture of this place here.
Tremendous crowd on hand for homecoming.
And of course, that's when I first started saying, hey, that's where I want to go to school.
Wow.
It was my dream.
And Steve Owens learned from an early age, growing up in this small house in Miami, one of 11 children, that hard work was the only way to accomplish that dream.
From the time I first started playing football, I looked for ways to get stronger, faster, quicker.
I learned so much from him.
Little brother Tinker would himself become an All-American wide receiver at OU.
I watched him work out like in track, and I would literally see him get sick because he worked so hard, wanting to be the best he could be.
And he would become the best in college football.
Gets to Steve Owens, first down.
I mean, he ricocheted up there. He was a ricochet romance, you know. He was, all you got was headgear and shoulder pads and run over people, and he slithers.
First down. One, he almost had it.
The Miami War Dog tailback wore out defenses. He could run all day. He credits his conditioning coach.
There's no daylight, Chris, so he had to go over the top.
He used to take me I think it was 5 or 6 miles east of Miami, and I would run into town. And if I started to slow down, she'd honk the horn.
She was the pretty little cheerleader from the crosstown school. She stole Steve's heart when they were 13 and 14 years old, and Barbara Owens is still coaching him today.
She was my biggest supporter, but my biggest critic. I think she saw something that I couldn't see.
In 1966, Steve Owens' final year in high school, he was named the co-winner of the Oklahoma Running Back of the Year. The lanky high schooler jokingly struck this Heisman pose that would prove to be prophetic. Owens narrowed his college choices down to OU and Powerhouse, Arkansas.
They fired Gomer Jones here, okay? And who they hired? They hired Jim McKenzie. Jim called me and said, hey, forget all that stuff I've been telling you about Arkansas. You need to follow your dreams and go to Oklahoma.
New OU coach McKenzie brought with him from Arkansas a confident young offensive coordinator named Barry Switzer.
The thing about Coach, he made playing fun. He was tough on us. And he challenged you each day to get better.
When we had a scrimmage in the spring of his freshman year, we lined him up at tailback. I thought that a lot of people said, oh, he'll play tight end. He's not going to be fast enough to play tailback or whatever. We had a goal line scrimmage, and he scored about 7 out of 10 plays.
And Owens gets his 8th touchdown of the year.
Steve Owens did not disappoint, being named all-conference running back his sophomore and junior seasons. But the best was yet to come his senior year.
Big 8 rushing record has just been broken.
I never thought about a Heisman. You know, I just wanted to come here, be a part of this tradition, and contribute to this place. Never thought about the Heisman until I won the Heisman.
Owens did it between the tackles, a workhorse carrying the ball a mind-blowing average of 36 times a game.
And who would you call on for that yardage? Steve Owens.
For 1,523 yards and 23 touchdowns to win the Heisman over a trio of quarterbacks. Days after winning the Heisman, Owens was invited to appear on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and he'll never forget what happened backstage in the green room.
And I'm sitting in the corner, door opens, and here comes this incredible person. It was Muhammad Ali.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was such a big fan of his. I couldn't believe it. Muhammad Ali. Shortly after the door opens, here comes Charlton Heston. Moses.
Steve recalls sitting between them holding the Heisman when an aide for Johnny Carson walked back in.
She said, "You got a call from the President of the United States, Richard Nixon." And Moses, Muhammad Ali, and Charlton Heston looked at each other and said, "Who is this guy?"
Steve and Barbara, the two kids from Miami, would go to the White House and meet President Nixon and even fly on Air Force One with him. Steve Owens' life would never be the same. In 1970, he was drafted in the first round by the Detroit Lions. Despite an injury-plagued pro career, he made the Pro Bowl the one season he was completely healthy. You definitely showed you could play at that level.
I could play at that level, and that was important to me.
He retired after 5 seasons in the NFL and now lives in Norman, where he has built an extremely successful insurance and financial business. His best friend? A guy named Billy Sims.
Still to come.
Boomer Sooner back and forth at the stadium. Those are things that I dreamed of hearing.
Texas native Baker Mayfield tells us why playing football for Oklahoma was like coming home.
It's different than everybody else.
Plus, Barry Sanders' success in Stillwater during his very first scrimmage.
And next, Billy Sims' explosive moves during his remarkable season in 1978.
The fact that I was at the right place, right time.
A couple of legends, and Steve Owens, just total class. Billy Vessels, John, let's talk about Billy Vessels from up in Cleveland, Oklahoma. You know, you look at that film against Notre Dame, he just blew by some of those guys. He had incredible speed.
He really did, and you know, those numbers in advancing the game, you know, you can look back at it now and say, wow, is this where this really all began, to where you're seeing all these eye-popping number statistics and how teams throw it all over the field? Because it looked like from a lot of that video, while you saw Owens, as you described in the piece there, doing it between the tackles, Billy Vessels was all over the field. Yeah. And that's what teams want to do these days, is get in as many one-on-one matchups as possible. And boy, Vessels, if somebody was a defensive back trying to stop him, good luck.
You know, one thing that I honestly wasn't aware of until I started talking to Steve Owens was what an incredible track athlete he was. His senior year, he was the state champion in long jump, state champion in high jump, state champion in high hurdles, second place in low hurdles. There was a track coach who coached Jeff Bennett, who was a decathlete at Oklahoma Christian College in 1970, ended up going to the Olympics in 1972. He said he watched them both in high school and that Steve Owens could have been a gold medalist in the decathlon. I mean, he was a great athlete.
And for all of us who aspired to greatness in the athletic world, what we're doing are stories on all of these guys who are just so incredibly blessed with talent that at some point you kind of just want to go, stop, you know, because everything they do, they did well. I mean, you'll see that with Sam Bradford. You'll see it with Barry Sanders. One of the things about Barry that we don't really touch on, how much he thought basketball, playing a lot of basketball, actually helped him as a running back with the explosiveness and leaving the floor. And, you know, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I remember seeing Barry Sanders in warm-ups for a charity basketball game dunk it with 2 hands, and he's 5'8", 5'9".
Incredible. Yeah, and you know, we talk about the great talent, and Jason White certainly had the great physical talent, but he lost so much of it with his surgeries. It was guts that got him back to winning the Heisman Trophy. I mean, 2 knee surgeries. That was when the second one happened, and we'll look at that coming up. I thought he was done. All right, John, we're about 8 seconds away from the next segment here, folks. Enjoy it. Back to our state, our Heisman. Here it is.
One of Coach Barry Switzer's most sought-after recruits was Billy Sims. In his 1978 Heisman winning season, Sims rushed for more than 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns. But it was a lot more than just numbers for Billy and Barry, the coach and player. Their bond on the sideline led to a lifelong relationship.
Second man, Sims. He's gone.
Billy had it all.
First down, Oklahoma.
He just separated himself from everyone else.
Sims, he breaks it up the middle, and he is gone.
He was just unbelievable, fun to watch.
Billy Sims.
He had the size,
Look out.
the quickness,
With the foot race.
the speed.
Touchdown. Oh, my goodness.
He was a winner. He knew how to win.
How many men would you think tried to tackle him?
Football was king. Everybody played football.
When Billy Ray Sims was in the 8th grade, he moved to tiny Hooks, Texas.
Just your typical small town. Town revolves around the school and the churches.
And on Friday nights, the religion of high school football.
Like the rest of Texas, it's always been.
Billy didn't even play football till 10th grade.
I was so afraid of getting hit, and I was just making people move, you know, miss me and all that stuff.
Like a man playing with boys.
As I say, it was a whole lot of running and no blocking.
He just didn't outrun everybody. He just went around them or over them and whatever it took.
Word of Billy's talent traveled far and fast.
10,000 people show up at a stadium that would hold 2,000 or 3,000.
Billy shattered longtime records as a senior in 1974. Recruiters from everywhere were hooked on Billy.
On Friday nights, every coach that was anybody would be in Hooks.
Including a young, charismatic OU coach, Barry Switzer.
I spent more time with Billy recruiting Billy probably than any other player I recruited.
But Billy was Baylor-bound until a now legendary phone call from Switzer during halftime of an important road game for unbeaten Oklahoma.
I walked in the locker room at Colorado in 1974.
Good on the wing to the right.
So I'm listening to the game.
Touchdown, Oklahoma.
And I called C.J. Conoco Service Station in Hooks, Texas, I-30.
One of my coworkers come out there and say, hey, Billy, Coach Switzer want to talk to you on the phone.
I'll never forget C.J. yelling, Billy, Coach wants to talk to you on the phone. I could hear him yell, he's coaching the game in Colorado. No, he's on the phone. He wants to talk to you. He said, get up. We didn't have much time.
And I thought my coworker was playing a joke on me.
We talked for 20 minutes. The referee says, Coach, kickoff is in 3 minutes. And I said, Billy, you hear that? We got to go finish this ass kicking. I'll call you later on tonight.
Did you come to Oklahoma because of Barry Switzer?
Oh, no question about it.
Highlighting a remarkable recruiting class of 1975, Billy committed to Barry, the beginning of a close lifetime relationship.
We had guys that could just flat out play football.
Quarterback Thomas Lott among them.
I spent so many hours out on this football field, and Saturdays were the good times. That was your reward.
Injuries kept Simbo out of the starting lineup early, but he started in '77 and had a huge 1978.
That was the year that he was totally healthy, and everyone got to see the Billy Sims that they had heard about.
Line off real quick. Big hole, Sims, touchdown.
He would do anything to try to get away from people.
Oh, he's something.
You got to get the ball in Billy's hands, because he'll make something good happen.
He's gone. Goodbye.
I do remember when he first started to flying, and he was like 5 yards from the goal line for the other 4.5 yards.
Fascinating the nation, the country's leading rusher, Billy steamrolled his way, becoming OU's third Heisman winner in 1978.
The winner is Billy Sims from the University of Oklahoma.
The fact that I was at the right place, right time with a great group of guys.
Billy was the #1 pick in the 1980 NFL draft by the Detroit Lions.
Being an offensive lineman has made it really easy for me.
He was reunited with fellow OU offensive tackle Carl Balderschweiler.
We had to learn a technique for his speed. He was so fast and would get there so quickly.
Billy Sims following Dexter Bussey. Touchdown!
He had something that only came through in a game when everything meant something.
Sims to the 5. He's over.
A knee injury ended Billy's brief but brilliant 5-year NFL career in 1984.
Most everybody's career ends before they're ready. And so he had to just kind of, reevaluate his life and, what he was going to do with it.
If you live long enough in life, you're going to have some ups and downs along the way.
Those downs included failed business ventures, an arrest for owing back child support, the hard times leading Billy to sell a close friend his Heisman Trophy.
The funds and everything went to my kids for college. See, a lot of people don't realize that.
But turning setback to comeback, Billy opened a successful barbecue restaurant chain. His football roots still run deep. as he's always supported Sooners.
And the winner is Jason White.
And when I get up there, Billy Sims is in the back yelling Boomer, which it kind of calmed me down a little bit. I was like, oh my gosh, how many times are you going to say that? And finally I said,
Sooner! Sooner! I've been saying it since '78. Yeah. And people in New York expect me to say it.
You got one?
I got one.
Let's hear it.
I'm going to say Boomer to the day I die. Yeah, to the day I die.
Boomer Sooner is more than a chant for Billy. It's become part of him since the day Coach Switzer recruited the Hooks headliner to the Sooner State.
Yeah, when you recruit them, you got them for life.
Got them for life.
You got them
you
for
know,
life.
he told me when I came up here, you know, he said, well, after the crowd and the cheering and your career's over with, I'm going to still be in your corner. He's been true to that. No regrets whatsoever.
I remember the first time I saw Billy, he was in the chow line and he had a cutoff sweatshirt and a big afro. And I put him in the category with Leroy and Dewey Selman, where when you walk on the field or you see Billy in the huddle, you just felt bulletproof.
What Sam Bradford did off the field that Bob Stoops says brought his game to the next level.
My heart was racing, my mind was racing.
And find out why the lights went out moments after Barry Sanders won OSU's first Heisman Trophy.
All right, back to Facebook Live. Hi, guys. We know that you're sending in a few questions. We'll try to get some of those. John, your thoughts on Billy Sims?
Well, he was as dominant in that piece as I remember him being when I was a youngster watching him grow up. The interesting thing to me, as physical a specimen as he was, the fact that he didn't like the contact. You know, that's something that you don't know about a lot of these guys. That was pretty revealing.
Yeah, and you saw him run over a bunch of people through his career. He may not have liked it, but he was pretty good at it. And the other thing that I'll never forget about it, he had that ability to give him just the defender just enough of his leg to think they had him, and then he just slid it away and he was gone. How many times did you see him do that and high kick into the end zone like that?
Oh gosh, that's a signature of his. And you know what? We've got something started here on this show. You had Steve Owens and Billy Sims, who drafted him, Detroit Lions. We're not done with that either.
No, that was a trend for the running backs. That's exactly, and the first two going down the knee injury in about the same amount of time in their careers.
Yeah, they each have 5 years of service in the NFL, and then, of course, we're going to get to Barry Sanders, and for those who are even vaguely familiar with him, he was obviously drafted by Detroit, and he spent 10 years there. So he made up for the two of them put together. That's 20 years of service from some three great running backs.
It really is. And, you know, Billy and Steve Owens seem to be very different kinds of personalities. They're best friends. They're like brothers. They've become so close through the years. And, you know, Billy has carved out his own path in business, and he's done well. And, you know, like a lot of us, it took him a few years to kind of figure out his way to do it. And he has done it. And he's he is one of the most loyal Sooners there could be. He and Steve Owens both.
Yeah, and you know, the thing I love about Billy is no matter if you haven't seen him in years, he always seems to greet you the same way. And it's always with a big smile, like he's happy, like you're the one person he wants to see. And that's one thing I've always loved about him.
And what a great story about Switzer calling during halftime of the Colorado game, spending the whole halftime talking to Billy. That's a good call on his part.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, I wonder, you know, we were talking about, well, would coaches even think about doing that today? Well, I mean, I got smartphones, right? So they could text someone if it's within the right NCAA.
All right, now our next segment. Let's take a look.
Barry Sanders is Oklahoma State University's first and only Heisman Trophy winner. His natural talent on the field proved he was born to run, and he still holds some of college football's biggest records.
He is within 47 yards of Marcus Allen's single-season rushing mark, and Sanders still has one game to go. Era, is there a chance this just locked up the Heisman for Sanders today?
I think so. As you heard me earlier in the day, he was my selection.
Late November 1988. 3 months earlier, Barry Sanders' name wasn't mentioned when it came to serious Heisman contenders. But it didn't take long that season for the nation to take notice.
The first few games, I just exploded. I don't know what my yards per carry average was, but it seemed like a touchdown or a big play. every time I touched the ball.
Before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go back to where it started. Sanders, a high school standout in Wichita, chose OSU over Tulsa and Iowa State.
And I wanted to get away from home, from my, 8 sisters or whatever, whatever it was. There was nothing bigger than going away to play college football.
I've teased my friends about this, John. You didn't have to be an Oklahoma State coach to get on Highway 35 and drive north.
When I saw what he did in that freshman scrimmage after being on campus 2 weeks in August of '85, I knew at that time that he was different than everybody else.
Sanders was dangerous enough to earn All-America honors as a kick returner his sophomore year. He also spent some time in the backfield with Heisman hopeful and future Hall of Famer Thurman Thomas.
I don't think long-term it was probably going to work, just because I know I wasn't at that point going to be able to block anybody as well as he would be able to anyways, and he wasn't going to be moving the fullback.
With Thomas gone to the NFL, the stage was then set for Sanders' Heisman run the following season. And the head coach was doing his best to keep things calm by telling the media the Cowboys would be a running back by committee that fall.
It wasn't going to be by committee, but maybe it was by committee, John, but the chairman of that committee was wearing 21.
I had no expectations other than that was exactly where I wanted to be, having a chance to start in the Big 8 conference.
That humble approach may have been in contrast to his dynamic play, but it is unmistakably part of what makes Sanders special. Where did your humility, where does that come from?
Oh, I don't think I had a choice. I think, but certainly to answer your question, I think mom and dad.
He would obviously toss or hand the ball to the official, would come by the huddle and pat each of the offensive linemen and the fullback on the head, and then jog to the bench.
By the time Heisman Saturday rolled around, Sanders had already rushed for more than 2,000 yards. Most of the finalists were in New York for the announcement, but Sanders was with his team in Tokyo.
And I wasn't sure even if I wanted to participate in any of it. It just happened to fall on game day.
What I was told, okay, by whoever was running the network,
the 1988 winner.
We're going to come on, they're going to announce the winner, but if it's Sanders, we're going to pan the camera on him, okay, basically just say thank you, and then you guys are out of here.
Here's Barry Sanders.
I looked composed, but my heart was racing, my mind was racing.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Thanks, Coach. We'll be back in a minute with a live interview from Barry Sanders.
Let me go back and get some sleep and get ready for this game.
And there's about 3 or 4 plugs in the wall. All right, so I'm thinking, well, I can solve this deal. I just reach over and unplug. You work at TV, I just unplugged a bunch of stuff. Lights go off. I said, come on, Barry, let's go.
And so many things changed for me in that moment, and I didn't want there to be a Heisman jinx.
There was no Heisman jinx. Sanders ran for 344 yards in a close win over Texas Tech. Then returned to Stillwater, where Cowboy fans were ready to celebrate, before heading to New York the following day for the Heisman dinner.
I guess you've seen I tried to escape earlier, but they made me stay.
I just remember going to New York and meeting my family there, and just, and that's when it really hits you, sort of a sign of things to come, in a lot of ways. And so I was trying to embrace it, but I was never someone who I guess got used to that much media attention, and so that part definitely took some getting used to.
The Cowboys capped 1988 with a Holiday Bowl blowout of Wyoming, and Sanders' single-season rushing total, without the bowl yards, still stands as the best in Division I football.
It would have been like hitting 100 home runs, or a pitcher winning 50 games, or some kind. And he could have had 4,000 yards if we'd had just done it.
And I had every intention of going back to school when I first won the Heisman. So fortunately, my dad sent me down several times and told me how much of an idiot I would have been to go back to school. And that's just the kind of guy he was.
Sanders left for the NFL and the Detroit Lions. And after a decade of success, he walked away from the game and into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2004.
This is, again, arguably the best back to ever play the game, period, at any level.
When somebody says that in describing you, greatest of all time, what goes through your head?
It's it's a great compliment, and sometimes I don't always know how to react to it, because I feel like I remember having that same conversation, about the running backs that I love to watch, in my formative years. And so it almost sometimes seems like they're talking about someone else. But it's a great conversation, and a great conversation to be a part of.
My first encounter with Barry Sanders came months after he won the Heisman Trophy at a benefit basketball game in Shawnee. He says he felt like he had a good game, and he loved playing against rival schools.
It's the whole reason he plays, college football.
Up next, big dreams on a big stage. Find out why in the world Jason White's first time in an OU huddle led to the tight end calling the play.
Barry Sanders, my first question is, it was shocking to see you in that picture with him. What happened to you, man?
Oh, life, Kelly.
Life,
you know how that goes. Yeah, just no. But that was on. He actually. I told him he actually did something on that floor in my alma mater, OBU, that I didn't do, and that was dunk in a game.
And you got him about 6 or 7 inches, don't you?
Well, I'm going to say 5. Let's just say 5. Okay. No, he was great though. He was tremendous, and he even went on with the whole question about greatest of all time. How does that make you feel? And he said, I sit there and I think of a guy like Bo Jackson, and I think there's no way I'm as good as him. That speaks as much to Barry's humility as we've gotten to know him over the years as anything else. But gosh, what a tremendous person.
I remember seeing him as a kick returner. We didn't know who he was. We were sitting in the stands. We didn't know, number 21. But Barry instead didn't mean anything to us, and we were OSU fans. That first season as a sophomore, he started running those, and I mean every time he touched it after a while. I mean that was the biggest play of the game, was the kickoffs that he would receive, and every time he touched it, you just thought he was going to go all the way.
Oh yeah, there's no question. He opened that year with the first kickoff, ran it back for a touchdown. Opened his Heisman year, opening kickoff, ran it back for a touchdown against Miami of Ohio. But the blitz that he put on, like how I dropped some product placement in
Very
there,
nice.
blitz.
Yeah.
Thank you. The blitz that he threw on Texas A&M that night, Jackie Sherrill's team did not know what hit them. And that's what Pat Jones says really made the nation take notice. But Barry was like, I remember Miami of Ohio, and that I just ran for a bunch of yards. I mean, it was funny to not get him pinned down to too much in that particular game.
All right, John, I'm going to ask you, greatest of all time running back, you think it was him?
Boy, he's right there. He's right there. We talk about the evolution of the position and how guys choose to run. There's nobody more elusive than Barry Sanders.
Absolutely.
So he may be the greatest elusive running back of all time.
And when you think about Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas, 2 NFL Hall of Famers in the same backfield, that is unbelievable. Okay, enjoy the next segment, folks. We'll be back.
Recruited nationwide by a lot of different schools. I took a trip to Miami. I took a trip to Tennessee, Alabama, and OSU. And my goal, I was going to Miami.
Jason White thought he had it all figured out, but fate, injuries, and the Sooners led him to take a different route to the Heisman Trophy.
White had not 1, but 2 season-ending knee injuries requiring reconstructive surgeries. While most counted him out for good, the hometown hero from Tuttle battled back to beat all the odds. Here's Robin Marsh.
As another day dawns in Tuttle, America, this small town reminds you of its big bragging rights.
Yeah, come on, bring it back.
Home of Jason White, 2003 Heisman Trophy winner.
Go, go, go!
He's always been a Tiger.
Hey, go.
And even though his looks have changed over the years, his drive never did. Jason White still regrets
Against Sulphur my junior year, it was in double overtime.
the game that got away.
I got tackled right here on the 2-yard line. I remember looking straight that way to see if I made it across the goal line, and I didn't make it.
A lifetime of memories rush in here at the Bill Hinkle Field at Tiger Stadium in Tuttle.
You'd run out on the field, you could see Dad, and then you look up and see Mom.
Jason White excelled as a high school quarterback, and by his senior year, big collegiate programs were recruiting, except the one team he loved, the Oklahoma Sooners. But things dramatically changed one December day back in 1998.
It is an honor and a privilege to be the next head coach here at the University of Oklahoma.
And I got home from school that day and my mom said, hey, you got a couple messages from some coaches. She said a new one called, Coach Stoops. And so I called him back immediately and he's like, I'd like to come out and talk to you. And I said, well, okay, well, when? Well, how far is it to Tuttle? And I said, well, it's about 45 minutes. And he goes, all right, I'll be there in 45 minutes.
Number 18's first snap for the Sooners came on a big stage.
And Hibble is rocked again.
The OU Texas game.
So now he's headed off.
Starter Nate Hibble got hurt, and Jason White says he was scared to death when he got in the huddle.
I was nervous, so Trent actually called the play and actually got sacked the very first play.
And they sack him.
After I got sacked.
Option look again to Griffin. Touchdown! The story of a backup quarterback.
We drove down the field and scored the only touchdown that game, actually.
These guys are for real.
The Sooners won, and Coach Bob Stoops knew he had a great leader in the making.
Jason did a great job tonight.
Jason's success landed him the starter's job, and a few games later,
in the middle, time, got Smith again.
The showdown in Nebraska, number 1 versus number 2 Oklahoma.
A nice throw by Jason White.
And that is when the unexpected happened.
An open man, he may take off, he'll drop into the open man. Griffin out of bounds. Now White is down.
In the second quarter of the game, Jason White's season ended with a torn ACL to his left knee.
I thought, okay, I'll have surgery, come back, it'll be good, you know. And I did that and came back the very next year, earned the starting job the very next year from the get-go.
Jason White, did his knee buckle?
My second start of that year, I hurt the right knee against Alabama.
You see him grab his right knee that time?
Knowing I was fixing to have a kid, knowing that, you know, this is a second injury, listening to people talk about how probably wasn't going to get to play again, you know, just, it was hard. It was really hard just to sit back and have all those things on your plate. And so once I decided, hey, I'm going to have surgery, I'm going to do everything possible to play again, and if I don't, well, at least I can say that I tried.
It's funny what God gives you. He takes away maybe his mobility, and now Jason has to rely solely on his arm and his smarts, and look what he does, wins the Heisman Trophy and leads us to a couple of great years.
And the winner is Jason White, Oklahoma.
Everything went blank after that. I remember looking at my parents. I went and gave them a hug. To be able to share that moment with my coaches and teammates, because at the end of the day, I was fortunate enough to be on a great team with great players, and I just happened to be the quarterback.
While this 40-pound statue and elite hardware are so impressive, the competitor in white still thinks about the game that got away. The national championship against LSU.
He'll fire middle, Clayton.
How bad were you hurting?
That's the million-dollar question. You know, I was pretty beat up from the Kansas State game, and I had about 3 weeks to heal up from that. I was still pretty beat up. And in fact, in the third quarter, I had broke my sesamoid bone in my foot and got it taped up and continued to play. And plus, I don't care if I, couldn't even walk. I was going to play in that game. And I mean, that's the whole reason you play, college football, is to play in that game.
And what about that pass?
I've watched it on film 1,000 times. I mean, it's like this far past his fingertips. If he catches that ball, he scores. We had the momentum, and I think we would have won the game. It was a long journey and a lot of roller coasters, but at the end of the time, it was well worth it.
A lot of people probably don't know that. Up next, Sam Bradford lets us in on one of the best-kept secrets during his OU career.
And still ahead, from two-time walk-on to Heisman Trophy winner, how Baker Mayfield plans to defy the odds again during his rookie season.
John, Jason White's story, one of the great comeback stories in OU football history. I mean, amazing what he did with two, what could have been career-ending knee surgeries.
You know, I can remember being in the stands in Lincoln. Dean and I were both, well, we were in the press box for that game where he hurt his knee the first time at Nebraska, because Eric Crouch, I think, went on for Nebraska that year. I think he won the Heisman that year, and they ran like a little flip back quarterback, pass back to the quarterback, and he scored in that game. I just remember that play specifically where Jason hurt his knee. Just think, as soon as it happened, it just had that look like it didn't look awful, but that's the way some of those ACL tears really look, and that is just a little bit of an awkward landing, and you just thought, oh gosh, I hope he can come back from that. But to do that not just once but twice and still come back and do that, that's a measure, the measure of the strength of a man and the perseverance that Jason White has.
The second time he went down, I thought it's over. I think we all thought it was over. And for him to be able to muster the courage and the strength to go back through that and to change his game, as Bob Stoops said, to become more of a finesse player. He had such great athletic ability before. Now he had to become a smarter player, a better passer, pick his receivers, and he did all that. And boy, and you know, and it's gone into his business career afterward. I remember when Jason started out as a pitchman for companies here in the metro area, and he has developed his style and everything into a new way. He's trained himself to be better and better at it, and that's, you can tell that's who he is. And as you said, the measure of a man.
Yeah, you know, we see that, you know, Barry Sanders has learned how to embrace more of the media stuff, even though he kind of stays away from it. Jason White certainly has become much more comfortable over the years with that, even though he'll tell you that's not a strength of his, being able to do that. Yeah, you understand that hard work is going to take you places no matter what you're talking about.
Yeah. Hey, we've asked a question on Facebook Live, but I want to make sure that you guys see it on Facebook Live. Who is the greatest running back ever in football? We're talking the NFL, NCAA, the greatest ever. And my vote is Barry Sanders. I don't think there's any other choice. But I know John is. Where are you at, John?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. At least the best elusive back in the game. Sam Bradford's talent, motivation, and determination have helped him weather every storm he's faced while playing football in college and the pros. And through it all, Sam has become a leader to admire, both on and off the field. The road Sam Bradford took to winning a Heisman was a little different than others. Natural athlete? Sure, but growing up, even in high school, football wasn't everything. It had its place, and that was that.
You know, my parents, they really just encouraged me, you know, to constantly try new things, and, you know, playing hockey, playing golf, playing football, you know, just trying it all, and, you know, I loved it all.
He could have went on and played, I believe, Division I basketball at some level, you know, and he had a lot of opportunities to go do some things, and I think he picked the right one, but that's just me.
Bradford's athleticism and versatility was on display at Putnam City North. But it took a while for big-name colleges to notice. Were you motivated by the fact that you weren't more highly thought of as a recruit, I guess?
No, because I probably didn't think of myself as, you know, one of those like highly recruited guys, just because, to be honest, you know, football was just kind of something I did in the fall. You know, it wasn't until my sophomore year when I started to get some attention.
Oh, you saw something in Sam early enough.
I really loved it when I started really paying attention to him on the basketball court. You really got to see what a great athlete he is. And jumping, dunking the ball, just could shoot from anywhere.
But soon after he arrived in Norman, he had to negotiate a pretty big pothole in the road to that Heisman.
You know, it was hard. You know, that first year, you know, it was really difficult for me. You know, I wasn't playing. You know, for a while, I really didn't even feel like, or didn't feel like I belonged at OU. You know, I wanted to quit. And I remember Coach Heupel was like, no, like, you're sticking it out. You know, you're not going to go play basketball somewhere. Like, you're going to play football. You're going to do this, and I'm going to help you.
That first year may have been difficult, but Bradford's head coach knew what everyone would find out later. Sam was a starter in waiting.
Well, I knew really when he was being redshirted, watching him direct the scout team. I kept telling our assistant coaches, have you watched him practice? And finally, I made them watch. So you guys need to pay attention to what he's doing. And then they agreed with me.
In the fall of 2007, Bradford started all 14 games, throwing for more than 3,100 yards with 36 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions. A career year for most college quarterbacks, but for him, it was more like a warm-up. The next year, Well, the next year was off the charts. How much fun was that? I mean, you guys were so explosive. I mean, it was crazy the numbers you put up.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the most fun I've ever had playing football. I hate to say it, but I mean, it was a matter of how many points we were going to score, you know, and we all had a lot of fun doing it.
The 2008 Sooners scored 51 points per game. Bradford threw for a school record 4,720 yards and 50 touchdowns, and along the way to the Big 12 title and BCS championship game, had his Heisman moment, the one that comes to mind for most people. And this is coming from a guy who also does Oklahoma State broadcasts. So you getting flipped, it seemed like at that moment, like, wow, was that the one for you, or is there another one that sticks out for you?
You know, that's the one that everyone kind of brings up because, you know, it got photographed and it was around and, you know, everyone's seen that. You know, but it seems to me there was just a stretch where, you know, I think it was Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, you know, maybe the Big 12 championship game, you know, where we just, you know, we played in primetime games, you know, 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and we were scoring 60 points every week, you know, and we were all having fun, you know, and we were just beating people pretty bad. You know, I think there was a stretch of 3 weeks or so where, you know, I kind of felt like, you know what, maybe I do have a chance at winning this.
And the winner of the 2008 Heisman Trophy is Sam Bradford.
When I heard my name called, obviously, you know, it was an incredible feeling, you know, in a weekend that, you know, I'll never forget.
There's so many people I need to thank. I mean, there's no way I would be here without.
How tough was that speech?
You know, it was tough because I didn't write anything. You know, I knew that if I won that, you know, there were obviously a lot of people that were involved and a lot of people that I needed to thank. But, you know, it just kind of came from the heart and it came out, you know, and I hope it sounded great.
Bradford's follow-up year didn't go as planned. Shoulder surgery in late October, ending his playing career in Norman and starting an unfortunate trend that has followed him in his NFL career. But it's also given him perspective.
You know, I feel like I've learned a lot about myself. You know, I've learned a lot about having to deal with, you know, not only the good things, but the bad things in life. You know, how to be a good husband during bad times. You know, now how to be a good father during bad times and in good times.
The book's not written yet. I think there's still some chapters there, and I think that, you know, a lesser player, a lesser guy, maybe wouldn't have stuck and fought back to get back to where he was, to rehab several times, to stay focused, to be with another team, to go out and try to be a leader on that team. To me, that is probably what I'm most proud of Sam Bradford for.
I think everything happens for a reason. You know, I think God does everything with a purpose. I think sometimes we don't understand what that purpose is at the moment things happen. But I think looking back in life, you know, looking back at some of the injuries and some of the things that I've gone through, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Up next, Baker tells us his secret to successfully anticipating his opponents.
This segment of Kelly Ogle in Oklahoma City, John Holcomb up in Tulsa. John, when I heard that Sam Bradford was going to be the starting quarterback at OU, I honestly thought they're in trouble. They must be really thin down, because the last thing I'd heard was he's third string down there.
Yeah, and you see, though, his well-rounded upbringing in terms of being athletic in a lot of different sports. I mean, one thing we didn't touch on in that piece, there are some knowledgeable hockey people who will tell you after having watched him play youth hockey that they think he could have played in the NHL. I mean, that's what we go back to what we were talking about earlier, is like these guys that are so tremendously blessed with athletic skills that it doesn't matter what they pick up, it's a matter of what they like the most.
Yeah, scratch golfer, could dunk the basketball, a great basketball player. And one of the things that struck me, I remember that you guys had him in studio for Sports Blitz, and I didn't realize until he was in studio how big he is. I mean, he wasn't that big coming out of PC North, but by the time he finished at OU, he was a big man.
He really was, and you know, he's in great shape. When we saw him in Tempe, it was the beginning of June when we did that interview. And one of the other things that he talked about, you know, not only physically gifted, but also Josh Rosen's that first-round draft pick, top 10 pick by the Cardinals, about how generous Sam has been with his time trying to help mentor Josh Rosen. This is a guy who's going to try to take Sam Bradford's starting job in Arizona. But Sam says, look, this is the way it's supposed to be, And I consider it an honor to be able to help someone and pass this along. I think just that last thing that he talked about, that God has a purpose for, you may not understand it at the time, but with all that he's been through, my goodness, he carries himself with such class and such great perspective.
He surely does. Folks, send in your questions on Facebook Live. We'll get to some of those after the program. He was tremendously accurate. I didn't think OU would ever have one more accurate, but I was wrong.
Reagan Mayfield, a Sooner born and bred from the state of Texas. Incredibly, a two-time walk-on, Baker literally introduced himself to Bob Stoops in 2014. 4 years later, the walk-on would walk away with championship rings and a Heisman Trophy. When Baker Mayfield walked on at Oklahoma in February 2014, it came with no fanfare, no cameras, no announcements, because the head ball coach didn't even know he was there.
After the very first welcome back meeting for the second semester with the team, a young man walks up to me and introduces himself, said, "Coach, I'm Baker Mayfield." I said, "You sure are, aren't you?"
Stoops was familiar with the quarterback from Texas Tech, a true freshman walk-on starter from day one.
You're paying attention, they're winning their first 5-6 games, and who's this true freshman I'm seeing all over the Big 12 stats?
But after his first season, Baker was disgruntled over losing his starting job due to injury and wasn't even guaranteed a scholarship offer, so it was off to Norman, a move he said he felt like was coming home.
The noises of the stadium, I can remember when I was 7 years old walking in, Boomer Sooner back and forth at the stadium. Those are things that I dreamed of hearing, and then being on the field in my own jersey in front of that.
OU already had a popular starting quarterback in Trevor Knight, fresh off a stunning season-ending performance, but it didn't stop the plucky Tech transfer from doing what he did best, compete.
Baker made the big plays, he made special plays, he stayed away from the ones that really hurt you, and he just did it more consistently.
Coach Stoops and Lincoln Riley named Baker the 2015 starter. Mayfield did not disappoint.
Mayfield keeps it. Watch him scramble and run.
Can he get outside?
He's going to make you miss him. He's going to find a way to pick up the first down. He's got as much arm talent as anybody that's ever come through here.
Touchdown, OU!
His uncanny ability on the field was matched by his remarkable leadership.
Players you knew gravitated to him in the locker room, and you knew they were going to fight with him. He just inspires that from the people he's around.
One of those players was newcomer receiver D.D. Westbrook.
It was never a dull moment with him.
D.D. and Baker became fast friends.
I mean, it was just fun. Like, he made the game fun. Everyone around us, it was just fun to play.
But when it came to the game, D.D. was wowed by Baker's insatiable thirst to win.
I saw his work ethic. You know what I mean? And it's contagious.
Baker's high profile didn't change his consistent support for his teammates.
He would pick me up in the morning, drive me to workouts, and after I got done with school and class and we were done for the day after dinner, I'd hit him up, he'd come pick me up and take me back home, and it became a routine every morning until I got a vehicle.
I don't know who suggested for him to live that far away from campus, but
with no car?
Yeah, if I would have had frequent driver miles, I definitely would have racked those up.
Mayfield, wide open, Westbrook, touchdown!
Mayfield to Westbrook became an unstoppable force, a playmaking machine, poetry in motion.
Savviness.
Mayfield.
Never giving up.
Fires over the middle, caught! Westbrook again!
He'd know how to lead a team.
This is Baker Mayfield.
I did what I could. I mean, but if the balls weren't where they were supposed to be, then there's no D.D.
The tandem so potent, both earned invites to New York as 2016 Heisman finalists. Baker finishing third, D.D. fourth.
Stepping down after 18 years as the head football coach here at Oklahoma.
Baker was shocked when Stoops stepped down after a Hall of Fame career, but he was certain Lincoln Riley would thrive as the new head coach.
He changed my life in many ways, but I learned a lot about myself in the game of football that helped me throughout the years, and it will continue to help me as I grow and learn more. He set the standard. He's a great role model, but then also how to prepare for your opponents.
Mayfield and Riley didn't miss a beat in 2017. A classic win in Columbus, a third straight Big 12 title, a second college football playoff berth in 3 seasons, and even in an overtime loss to Georgia, one of the most memorable Rose Bowl games in history. But that final year didn't come without unwanted headlines.
That's part of our business. I mean, there's going to be slip-ups. These guys are going to make mistakes.
It's debatable how out of line the flag plant in Columbus really was, but no debate about two other unacceptable incidents: the drunken arrest in Arkansas and the ugly sideline antics at Kansas.
I wasn't too concerned about it because I had admitted that I made mistakes, and I got to learn from them, and I was proud of that.
I really do apologize from the bottom of my heart.
I think he handled it well. I appreciated that, even though, you know, those were so public, that he owned them. You know, he took responsibility. He grew from them.
All things considered, it was a career for the ages, capped by hoisting the 2017 Heisman Trophy.
Baker Mayfield, the 83rd Heisman Trophy winner.
All the summer workouts, all of the tough times you went through with your teammates, all that was worth it, because that wasn't just my award, that was all of us. Everybody that had impacted my life and helped me get there to that point, that was for them, and we got to enjoy that all together.
The Heisman was followed by being selected #1 overall in the NFL draft by the Cleveland Browns.
To me, the biggest difference is the mental aspect of the game. You got to know football to be able to play at this level.
Baker's story in Ohio is just starting to be written, while his storied career at Oklahoma is in the books and may very well never be matched.
From a kid that grew up having dreams of going there, the fans made it a dream come true.
Thank you for joining us for Our State, Our Heisman.
To see more interviews from these Heisman stars, go to our website, news9.com. We'll see you back here at 10.
Our State, Our Heisman has been presented by VW of Edmond.
Welcome back to Facebook Live. Boy, John, what more can you say than, I mean, Baker Mayfield, to be a walk-on, to be shunned at Texas Tech. I mean, he didn't even get offered at Texas Tech. He walked on there, got the job there when the starter in front of him got hurt, lit it up, then he got hurt. He'd won 5 or 6 games in a row at Tech, and they didn't offer him a scholarship. He was injured. He thought, are you kidding me? I won basically every game I played. He bailed out and went to OU, and the rest is history.
What did you say about Sam Bradford when you heard he was going to be the starter? You thought, oh, they're in trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
When everybody was making a big deal about Baker Mayfield transferring and he was going to be a walk-on at OU, I think that was kind of the general consensus for those who hadn't really studied him and his talent, that we all just kind of went, so, you know, and,
yeah.
And boy, he had something to say about that for sure.
Absolutely. If you're just joining us on Facebook Live, we'd love to take your questions. I did have one earlier that was a kind of serious question about Steve Owens and his voice. Steve has a condition that causes his vocal cords to spasm. His health is fine. The only way to treat it is with Botox, and he doesn't want to do that. But trust me, he walked around that stadium with me, and that's a big old place, and walked down on the field, and he's in great condition, and he's enjoying life, and just one of the nicest, classiest men you can imagine, Steve Owens.
I think the more impressive thing about that is that you were able to walk around with Steve after everything you had going on there.
Well, I was trailing him a little bit, I have to admit. Hey, let's talk about, I want to talk about Baker Mayfield real quick, John. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah. Dean Blevins, who wanted to be with us tonight, has had back surgery. He'll be back in Sunday, and he's doing well. But he went up to Cleveland to talk to Baker Mayfield, and he says he's handling this guy is in the middle of a media storm up there. I mean, everywhere. And Dean says he's handling it with such class and poise, and he's been so impressed with him. He says he's very focused on what he's doing. Says he didn't expect to go in there and be treated as a starter, wants to earn the spot, and Dean says it's been good for him not to be the recognized starter at this point.
Well, you know, you go for so long with that motivation of that chip on your shoulder to get you to where you really want to be. And then once you get in the spotlight, you know, I'm sure it's this way for a lot of people. Kelly, you know, you get in the spotlight and sometimes you don't have any history on how to react in a situation like that. So sometimes things get a little bit sideways, as Dean pointed out in the piece. But what he's doing right now is really good. Baker's always been a guy even I guess when he was at Texas Tech, that if he's your guy, if he plays on your team, you love him, and if he's not your guy, then some of the things that he would do rubs opponents and opponents' fan bases the wrong way.
Yes.
And it's understandable when you act like that. But doing what he's doing now, I think everybody grows up, or hopefully grows up at some point, and I think he's going through that maturing process. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, though. Today on social media, he's all over it because there's the picture of him shirtless.
With the tiger.
It's for, with the tiger from the movie The Hangover, too, by the way. I know it's one of your favorites.
Yeah.
You've got him, and he's leaning up against a Rolls Royce. So that's for the new deal he has with an underwear company. And then he also, on the Rookie Show, does a spot-on impersonation of the Cleveland Browns GM, who chomps on his gum and talks about how important it is, the priority of being a Cleveland Brown. It's pretty good stuff if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, he's all over the internet and television, and the fact that HBO has focused Hard Knocks, their show on Cleveland this year, and he's getting more and more of the limelight in that. To their credit, they didn't go overboard with it, but I think more and more it's going to be impossible for them to avoid it. He's comfortable at it. Yeah, and you're exactly right. I'm an OSU guy, but I also grew up on OU football, as you saw earlier in the show. So I love them both, and anyone who says you can't do that, you can do that. Trust me. I want them both to win all the time except for one game. And when he was, he's just that guy that when he's playing against you, you always think he's going to beat you. You do. You just think he's going to find a way.
Yeah, it's frustrating for opponents' fan bases there. And you think about that situation at Texas Tech that he walked on into. Davis Webb was there, another quarterback at Texas Tech who didn't stay. I mean, Pat Mahomes had something to do with that. Davis Webb ends up going to Cal and transfers out. So those two guys who were kind of battling for it, neither one of them worked out. You just wonder about some of those dynamics. Just for about 10 minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in the head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, and his quarterbacks meetings, just to see what was going on that caused all of this stuff to kind of spread out like that.
Yeah, and I've kind of been watching some of the stuff about Baker Mayfield, and he's commented before that Kingsbury kind of gave him the cold shoulder after he got hurt, which I don't really understand because Baker had played so well for him. I mean, and in Baker's words, acted like he didn't even know his name. And when they didn't offer him a scholarship, I think he was just done. I'm going to go where I want to go, and trusted his gut. And he's always been the underdog since he was in high school. And to walk into OU, to walk into a situation where there's an established quarterback, it made no sense. But he made it happen. That's Baker Mayfield magic.
Well, and you look at the list of people we've profiled tonight. And I'm sure that they all, at some level, didn't think of themselves as the star or the Heisman favorite. I mean, you heard Sam Bradford say, no, I didn't think of myself being like a highly recruitable guy coming out of high school. Barry Sanders talked about, hey, I was from Kansas. And, this is, the good football players in the Big 8 back then came from Oklahoma and Texas. So there's always that little bit, even if they don't admit that there's a chip on their shoulder as obvious as the one Baker Mayfield had success with. All of these guys on some level had that same sort of mentality, and I think that's pretty interesting.
Okay, John, question for you. Who in the Big 12 will be considered a Heisman candidate this year? Anyone?
Will Grier, the quarterback from West Virginia, is a big-time Heisman candidate already. He's getting a lot of preseason hype here, and he's the one who started his college career at Florida, had the suspension because of it was performance enhancing. I can't remember exactly what it was, but anyway, he had to sit out the suspension, ends up transferring. It had a decent year last year, broke a finger on his left hand, his non-throwing hand, and but they think with all of his experience and with having a couple of receivers he really trusts that he's poised for a big year.
Okay. What about from OU?
Rodney Anderson from OU and then Justice Hill from OSU, the running backs. Well, I think they would be the most obvious ones. And, you might say, well, what about a Kyler Murray? Well, I mean, you've gotten this far and Lincoln Riley hasn't named a starting quarterback yet. It's not that either one of them might not have a great year, but compared to Baker Mayfield's year last year, either one of those two guys or combined could be really, really good this year for Oklahoma. and still pale in comparison with what Baker Mayfield did doesn't mean they won't have success. I think it's going to be, I think you're going to see, Kelly, I think you're going to see teams try to run it more, certain teams try to run it more this year as defenses have changed to try to stop the throwing the ball all over the place as much as they can. So that could play into the hands of a Hill or an Anderson, but I still think balance is the best way to go offensively.
Yeah, Rodney Anderson to me was very impressive last year. I'm anxious to see now that he's full throttle how he'll do as he comes right out of the gate this year. He could be really special. And Justice Hill, we know what he is. I mean, he is elusive. He is one of those heart stoppers who can break it at any time too. And he's a lot of fun to watch. And I was surprised today that he didn't make first or second team preseason. Were you surprised by that?
I was surprised that neither one of them was second team. You know, that you do have some talented backs. You've obviously got Bryce Love from Stanford. You've got the young man from Wisconsin and a couple of other guys there. But, gosh, I mean, listen, go back and, I mean, look up on YouTube or whatever. Look at the Bedlam game last year and watch Justice Hill in that game. Or look at Rodney Anderson in Manhattan, Kansas last year and tell me those guys aren't worthy of something like that.
People have written in that, hey, only one Heisman winner for OSU. The second closest was Terry Miller, who was a great running back, and in '77 came in second in the Heisman balloting to a pretty good running back named Earl Campbell.
Yeah, Earl Campbell was so dominant back then, so powerful. You know, but that's what he possessed. Earl wasn't going to make you miss like
he didn't care about that.
Barry Sanders was. He was just going to run flat over you and maybe hurt you while he's doing it, but then he might help you up after the play was over. You know, University of Tulsa had some finalists too. You know, Jerry Rome back in the 60s when they really took advantage of the passing game. He was in there. Billy Guy Anderson, I think, was also another one. But both quarterbacks at TU back in the mid-'60s under Glenn Dobbs, they both had great seasons and got recognized but didn't quite get all the way to getting the trophy.
Well, one other running back that we mentioned in the piece, but only as a sidebar in the Barry Sanders piece, was Thurman Thomas, and he actually was actually a finalist. He finished 7th in the Heisman Trophy balloting. There have been so many great running backs and quarterbacks. But when I think of running backs, I also think of you got guys like Marcus Dupree who didn't stick around, who was you know, incredibly special. There were a lot of running backs. Joe Washington, Greg Pruitt, those guys early on. I mean, man, those guys were special running backs. And
there's no question. You had Ernest Anderson at OSU before Thurman or Barry, and it's still to this day. There's only one college program that's had two guys even share a little bit of time in the backfield, who both then went on to the NFL and are in the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame, and that's Thomas and Sanders.
Yeah, I'm going to get your thoughts as we get ready to wrap up here on what kind of pro Baker Mayfield will be.
You know, that's interesting. I think that he has shown that he's more than just flash, and I know it's just been preseason, and I get it. There's only 2 games here. But when you look at the young guys who were thrown into the fire for the first time, let's just take Mason Rudolph at Pittsburgh, for example. That first series the other night, throws a pick 6. He's seeing higher level athletes defensively. You know, maybe a few more things in the secondary that maybe they hadn't shown the first time he was in there. But when you get up against the first teamers or more of the guys who are going to see playing time for these pro teams, you get a better handle on it. The first game, you can almost throw it out the window unless the guy just is absolutely horrible. He's been solid through 2 games. He will be as good as his offensive line allows him to be, that's for sure, and Cleveland's had a problem with that over the years. But if you'd asked me this question 3 years ago, I'd have gone, yeah, there's no way. Even if you'd asked me this question a year and a half ago, I might have said, oh, he's going to make a team somewhere, but I just don't see him being successful. Now I'm more to the point of he's got a good arm and understands where things should be, that I don't think it's out of the realm to suggest that he's going to have success. For how long? Who knows?
Yeah.
Got to stay healthy.
Your point is valid about how good Cleveland's protection is going to be for him, but it is also valid that his arm is way better. I mean, he has a great arm. Everyone knew that in college, but he has a gun, he has an NFL special arm that I think he can be a great player. And like I say, I'm an OSU guy, but Big Baker Mayfield fan. I just like to see an underdog. I love to see a guy who grinds and just refuses to accept no for an answer. And that's who he is. And he scares you to death when you are his opponent.
Yeah, I thought you were going to add the fact that you finally like seeing him in orange now.
I do. The orange does have a nice glow about it. I like it. All right, Dave. Well, John, great to visit with you. Fun to look back at all these incredible Heisman Trophy winners in Oklahoma. I mean, what a heritage of football greatness we have here. We're spoiled.
Oh, yeah, we are, and I appreciate so much the people who came up with the idea to allow us to take the time and go get these interviews with these great athletes and to revisit what they mean to us. I mean, this is just tremendous. And Kelly, you know this because for a long time, and I've been up here in Tulsa for a long time. But we've got great ownership, people who say that's a great idea. Let's just go do it.
Yeah. And I know you had Craig Day. I don't know who else you had involved back behind the scenes. If there are any other names you want to throw
Christy
out there?
Webb. Yeah, Christy Webb for sure. She was the one keeping us all on point on deadline and helped us with a lot of the file video too. And of course, there are several other people involved here too. Chris Newsom was one of the photographers who went with me to Detroit, and Ty Lewis, who'd been with us, he went with me to Tempe. And you know, big thrill for both of them too, just like me, getting to sit down with Heisman Trophy winners and guys that they'd watched and admired playing football.
Yeah, absolutely. Here in Oklahoma City, Craig Gaglio, our photojournalist who's on special projects, Deanne Stein, who works on special projects, and Amanda Hager, our special projects producer, all very involved in this. Lots of people behind the scenes, and Robin Marsh, and of course our Dean Blevins. We miss him tonight. I look forward to have him back Sunday night. You'll keep him in line. John, great to hang out with you tonight. Fun to look back. We'll do something special like this again soon. Maybe when we win another Heisman, maybe after this season.
Let's just go do this all over again, Kelly. Love spending time with you.
Sounds good, buddy. We'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching Our State, Our Heisman, folks.